How could this be weaponized?
People want to understand what CERN is. If they would just indulge me for a little bit, they'll have a clear understanding of why they're doing it, what they're looking for, and what is the potential and the facts that will come out of these experiments. CERN, and amazingly, it won't come from the scientific community or anybody who has knowledge of physics. They will not tear it apart because they understand what I'm saying. So I'm gonna make this as basic as possible. I want you all to imagine, if you want to know what CERN is doing, I want you to imagine you come into a world and you find architecture all over the place, buildings and homes and houses, and you think they're beautiful, and it's really a big discovery. You find out with the houses, you can house people. You can do many things with a house, with a structure. All of a sudden, after many years, you become curious and you say, what's holding all this together? And you begin to find not nails that you can take out, but glue that has bonded itself to the materials. And you become interested in that glue that's holding the structure together. And so you're fascinated by this glue, and you've tried everything to replicate it. You can't, because it's hardened. Glue is hardened. You come to the realization the only way to find out how this glue is working is to break it down to its basic particles. And you have to have that glue in its former state, not the state after it's already hardened, right? So you don't want it in the cured state, the state that you can see. You want it in its initial state, which is a liquid state, before it hardens. And so CERN, basically, is a device that will allow them to examine particles in their initial state, not after everything is bonded together. That's a very simple way to look at what CERN is doing. They're trying to find the glue that holds everything together, is what they're doing. That's the purpose of CERN. Now, what has come out of CERN is called antimatter, which was first actually produced. It was first produced in 1955. And CERN is a very old organization, but it was produced in 1955, and they found positrons, which are anti-electrons. To understand what antimatter is, I'm going to have to explain the very bare basics of what matter is. And believe me, it's going to get very weird here shortly, because you're going to begin to see exactly what they're doing. But you have to understand what you're looking at now. The matter and antimatter are in fact opposites. Now, the matter that we have in front of us, if you take a piece of wood, nothing happens. It's just a piece of wood. But if you set that wood on fire, you have caused a reaction. And then it's in a dangerous potential state. It's active. If you have a battery outside of your cell phone, it does nothing. You put the battery inside the cell phone, the electrons begin to flow. The electrons will flow from one place to another. Essentially, that's what electronics are, the control of electrons. They control the direction, the speed of electrons, which create tiny pulses. They flow or don't flow, flow or don't flow. Those are called gates. Those gates form computers. And with a computer, we can do fascinating things. This is why they did, in fact, take Nikola Tesla's findings, because he discovered some things with electrons and protons that were very fascinating. Electricity within itself is a visual observation of electrons and protons in their active state, non-controlled state. Antimatter is the opposite of the matter that we can control. Antimatter cannot be controlled. In fact, when they first produced antimatter, they had to have a facility to contain it, because unlike the wood, where you have to have a reaction to cause it to burn, antimatter, you have to have a containment to cause it not to burn. That's the only way they can store it, with massive facilities to store. Let me give you an example. In a nuclear bomb, it takes timing, which takes electronics, and the explosions have to be just right to cause a reaction. That's a nuclear bomb, like the Hiroshima bomb, which takes pounds of nuclear material to cause it to react. And it has to be very precise. Well, let's go the opposite. Let's say we had antimatter, correct? If we had 1 gram of antimatter, that would equal about 42 or 40, let's just say 45 kilotons of TNT, which is about 4 Hiroshima bombs. And it's already inherently unstable. It's unstable. The only way to harness antimatter is to contain it. And it takes very large and expensive facilities to contain just 1 gram of antimatter. Some have failed, some have not. If those containment devices fail, they cause megaquakes. That's what happens when they fail. Now, we're talking small, tiny drops of antimatter. I mean, just drops of raw antimatter. It's highly unstable. It has to be isolated from the rest of reality when it's contained in a literal sense. Now, given that this can be weaponized, which is true, there are other implications that the average person has not thought about. Our body is held together by that glue that they're searching for, that bonds matter together. Those who understand what's called the standard model, they have a pretty good idea of what would happen if the force table in the standard model is just an explanation of how all things work. You're dealing with matter and force, and they have categorized the elements of matter, everything we can touch and feel and observe, in what's called quarks, the building blocks of protons and nuclei, and leptons, which are essentially, well, that would be like an electron. And then we have force. Force are lumps of energy that transmit the forces that bring matter to life. Like a photon, it carries the electromagnetic force. Without a photon, we couldn't produce motors or anything else. Without gluons, which carry a strong force, neutrons and protons would not be held together. In other words, the universe would not exist. And of course, you have U, W, and Z particles, which are for weak forces that govern radioactivity. So you have this standard model, and in your room, the Higgs field is in operation. Listen, with the Higgs field, they can begin to alter reality as we know it. Now, a lot of people they can't capture that right away, but you have to remember our world is made up of matter. The antimatter is what we can't see, what we can't touch, what we can't feel, though we interact with it every day. A lot of people like to think of antimatter as the other dimension, which is the opposite of this dimension. It's an inconceivable place that is hostile inherently. It's not under control. It's very hostile. This dimension would be the more tamed dimension. Here's what they've done since the 1930s. Well, actually, since the 1800s. There was a group that studied nothing but the phenomena of paranormal activity, not like you've seen on TV, not like you've seen in Hollywood, not like anyone knows about. But they studied the science behind paranormal activity and have then defined that this is called a dimensional slip, where things can obviously interact with this world all the time. And they were wondering the interactions between known matter and that type of matter. But they also found with antimatter, this antimatter can be absorbed by any realm of paranormal activity. It is, in effect, neutralized and absorbed. So there's a physical effect to the spiritual world in antimatter. And often, demonic entities and all these other paranormal things are attracted to antimatter. They're attracted to it. For every gram of antimatter that's produced, and then it's bought into this world, when they produce it, it attracts things from another dimension coming here. What is CERN going to do? Is to allow humanity to produce pounds of antimatter. The consequence of this search to gather more and more of this matter By the way, they have a more efficient method. As much antimatter as they desire efficiently. It's right now to obtain antimatter is very inefficient. It's very inefficient. In other words, to get a pound of it would take about 10,000 years at the current rate. It's just not going to work. CERN will allow them to do that probably within a week. But here's the consequence. They've observed the energy of both matter and antimatter. They found out that antimatter is intimately tied to every single life form on this planet. They found out that energy signature is the same energy signature in all life on this planet. All life, none excluded. Found out when any life form is in the presence of antimatter, the energy of the life form changes. The energy changes. I'll put this in basic terms. A person has both dark and light already in them. It's part of their makeup. It's what you can't live in a material world without antimatter. Nothing would exist. And so a person has both good energy, which would be this realm, this realm of matter, but they also have energy of antimatter. So they're connected. A person is connected to both realms at the same time on the energy level. And they don't even know it. They don't know it. And they have found, certainly, with all the experiments they have found out why paranormal activity exists. They know exactly what it is. They don't want to tell anybody. This is why they perpetuate foolishness on television. But every single person, every single life form is connected to that realm, that other realm, into this realm of reality all the time. Now, a person's thoughts, how a person feels, and doctors know about this too, how a person feels will determine which energy they draw from. You can draw from this realm, good realm, and you have positive results. That's called faith. That's why doctors believe in it. That's why they give out placebos. They know that if a person believes something is helping them, they have it within themselves to repair. They can command their bodies to be repaired simply based on belief. And people think they work. And people have recovered from cancer. People have recovered from back injuries. Quadriplegics have been repaired simply by their own faith. This other realm, because that energy is contained in another dimension, so to speak. That's the containment wall. But when a person draws that energy in, it is the opposite of this realm. In this realm, again, we have to light a piece of wood with a flame to catch it on fire. In that realm, it's already on fire. You have to contain it to see the wood because it's engulfed in flames. It's the opposite of this realm. When a person changes their emotional state, their energy changes, and they begin to draw their energy from this other dimension, this chaotic and violent and uncontainable place where they draw dark matter from, intimately linked. And it's in operation all the time. Now, the scientists, they are aware of this. Now, here's the other part that's not so comforting. On the spring equinox, forces change on the Earth, and they know this. They know that forces do change, which will, in fact, allow them to have better results. And believe me, it's timed perfectly. It is timed perfectly. With the basic introduction of what CERN is doing and what it is, and the dark matter and matter itself, now we get into the heart of the matter, of what's actually, there will be consequences. It's just that there have been consequences before. Nobody took notice. And the energy signature of dark matter, which, by the way, resides everywhere. But once you bring it into this realm where we can actually see it and observe it, it attracts things from the other realm. Dark matter is tied to dark matter. Everything has a connection. Everything has a connection. That connection can never be broken by anything. If they bring dark matter into this realm, it's still connected to that realm where the dark matter came from. No matter how far away they put it anywhere, it's still connected, because that realm is everywhere and it's still connected. Because it's connected, it effectively increases paranormal activity around where it's contained. And this is why they shift facilities of where they once kept dark matter in a college. I won't name it for the sake of the college, but the university. They had to move it to a deep underground facility because of what was happening to the people in the college. People began to have vivid dreams, nightmares. The violence began to erupt, and vile things began to happen in those places. And it's because it's a chaotic piece of matter. It is just chaotic. And it's very difficult to contain something that is so powerfully chaotic. This is what an explosion is, by the way. When an atom bomb explodes, it releases chaos. Chaos in the form of chemicals, reactions, and everything is out of order. An explosion is the absence of order. That's what an explosion is. When you contain something, you're giving it order. So it's controlled. Here's the worst part. Understanding that dark matter is always connected to its source, which is that realm where the dark matter came from, the realm that's all around us. Just imagine that dark matter being the ocean, right? Imagine this realm being the submarine. We're all in the submarine having fun, and we're doing our thing, and we have disagreements here and disagreements there. And then we find out there's a hole in the sub. But the hole is not, we thought the hole was in the sub, but it wasn't in the submarine itself. It was, in fact, in the people. The people's water inside their bodies began to increase based on their emotions. Let's just say that. And the dark matter can then come into this realm through people. That's, in fact, what they discovered in 1950, that people can also produce dark matter by way of, it's very minute, it's very tiny, but it's measurable, it's quantifiable. In fact, they now know how much energy a person has to have before they go absolutely berserk. They also know how much of that energy signature a person must have before an entity from that realm can possess them, which also allowed them to understand that not everybody can be possessed. Not everybody can be, but the person has to be prepared to be possessed. They have to be, in essence, they have to be a portal themselves to be possessed. Not everybody can be possessed. And so, not to get way off target, but this dark matter is everywhere. That is, that, you know what, all these things, here's what, I mean, it really gets to me, is that these scientists, over the course of many years, have quantified, or they have calculated these things. They have extracted the truth.
I'm here on a nice sunny day, and I started wondering about light and what it's made of. Is it a particle? Is it a wave? Light is one of those things that most people don't seem to fully understand. If you were to zoom in on a ray of light, what would you see? It might help to begin with this. Light is a form of radiation. We all know that too much sunlight can trigger skin cancer. We also know that radiation exposure can raise the risk of developing some forms of cancer, so it's not hard to put the two together. But not all forms of radiation are the same. Photons are subatomic particles that carry electromagnetic radiation and force. When electrons become excited, they can emit a pack of light, or a photon. Biophotons are photons of light in the ultraviolet and low visible light range that are produced by a biological system. Although photons are most often associated with light, they do exist in all matter, including human cells. As you walk around, you're constantly emitting low levels of these light particles, although they're invisible to the naked eye. How bioluminescent you are might just say something about your health. The photons in animals, plant matter, and human cells are referred to as ultra-weak photons, and scientists have been researching biophoton emissions since the 1960s and their connection to metabolism and disease. Biophotons may be detected with photomultipliers or by means of an ultra-low noise CCD camera to produce an image, using an exposure time of typically 15 minutes for plant material.
Inside is very dark when I close the door, and the plant has stored the light from outside. And if I put on the device, then you can see the light which is now emitted from the plant on the screen.
Nothing connected to the plant.
Nothing connected to the plant. It's just the plant itself. The light, what the plant has stored from outside, and it's now emitting the light. And you see the intensity is now decreasing, it's going down. And we watch that increasing intensity, and with other devices we have a better solution of the intensity. Here you see the plant is not here, and you also see the flickering of the photons. That's from the background. With other devices we have a better background solution. And now you don't see much more here. And we have the possibility to illuminate the plant again. I will do that now. Now we are illuminating it. And if I now switch on, the plant has also stored the light.
But it doesn't have anything to do with chlorophyll, right?
No, it doesn't have to do with that. That's the biophotons. Every biological and non-biological systems can store a bit of light.
If you wait it long enough, there will be still light?
Yes, yes. So the light is always there.
And you can detect it?
We can detect it. We have some photomultipliers that are much more sensitive than this camera, because this plant is emitting much of light.
Fritz Albert Popp is a German researcher in biophysics, particularly in the study of biophotons. He has been quoted as saying that, "We know today that man, essentially, is a being of light. We are still on the threshold of fully understanding the complex relationship between light and life, but we can now say empathetically that the function of our entire metabolism is dependent on light." Born in 1938 in Frankfurt, Germany, his research confirms the existence of biophotons, defined as particles of light with no mass that transmit information within and between cells. His work shows that DNA in a living cell stores and releases photons, creating biophotonic emissions that may hold the key to illness and health.
Professor Popp, founder of the International Institute of Biophysics, explains to us what a biophoton is and its crucial role in cellular communication.
Maybe we should explain a little bit what photon is, because it's an elementary particle of light, right?
Yeah.
So when you say that there are only a few photons, it's a very, very low intensity of light.
Very low intensity. It corresponds to a candle at a distance of about 20 kilometers. So there are really single units of an electromagnetic field. Photons are events, are processes where energy is taken up by the multiplier or by a detector from an external electromagnetic field.
Can you please share with us what they actually are, how do they work, and where are they coming from?
The biophotons are photons coming out from living systems. Therefore, we say not bioluminescence, but we say biophotons, because they are so weak that you can count single photons. And the best is to tell you, at an example, what they do and why they are important. We have in every cell, we have about 100,000 chemical reactions per second. If I say 21, 22, in every of your cells there happened 100,000 chemical reactions. And nobody can tell you who is responsible for that chemical reaction takes place just at the right time and on the right position. And if I tell you there are photons which are responsible for that, because a chemical reaction can only happen if the molecule which is reacting is excited by a photon. So the photon is necessary to stimulate a molecule to a chemical reactions.
So any alive tissue, any alive cells produce photons, produces light.
We are swimming in an ocean of light. It is very impossible to get a complete darkness. You have always photons. Some people say it's not surprising that in the cells you have also photons. But it is surprising because of the following. Not the intensity of the photons are important, but they have a very high degree of coherence.
Coherence is an important aspect of biophotons. It refers to the ability of a wave, and light comes as waves, to exhibit what is known as interference. Interference, when it refers to light waves, means that two or more waves can be added to result in a new wave pattern.
I would say they have a very high degree of order, extremely high degree of order. This was shown not long ago by a group of chemists at Berkeley in California. They showed that by photosynthesis, where the photons are used for getting energy, the coherence extremely high. So coherence means that the photons can be superposed, that the message which is submitted by the photons gets very, very clear. For instance, when we speak together, it may be the lower the noise is, the more silent we are, the better we understand each other.
So actually this is probably very important, because why biophotons actually are so special if they are everywhere? For example, what does distinguish them from a heat, which is also electromagnetic radiation and can be radiated from all living organisms?
Yes, heat is the waste of electromagnetic fields. But photons, biophotons, are very distinct signals. Heat has a very low degree of coherence.
Noise.
But if these photons have a high degree of coherence, they can work as submitters of information. The lower the noise is, the lower the intensity is, the better is the chance that you can submit the information with a very high efficiency. For instance, not long ago, American physicists and chemists showed that during the photosynthesis, the photons which are coming from the sun are taken up with an extraordinary high degree of coherence, which allows them that only a few % are transmitted into heat. They have a very high efficiency. And the same happens when you transmit information. You have to have a very high efficiency in order to have a clean understanding of what happens.
So let's get into it more deeply. Actually, how can biophotons send encoded message or that information communicating between biological cells? And has this message to be delivered really with photons, with speed of light?
Yes, but as I told, the biological system has a much higher capacity of doing that we can do it technically. For instance, the coherence time of the best laser is about 1/10 of a second. But the coherence time of biological system is at least in the order of days or even weeks.
Amazing.
So you have a very, very high degree of coherence. And this allows the biological system to communicate with the highest possible clearness which is able. So, for instance, these 100,000 reactions which happen in one cell per second, they are controlled, they are regulated by photons. And then it has to be very accurate at what time, in what place is a photon transmitted. And the information which we call about is created by the field, by the electromagnetic field behind. And this field is able to produce a pattern. And always, if you have a spatial-dynamical pattern, so it's not only a pattern in the locality, it is also a pattern in the time. This spatial-dynamical pattern provides the information of a cell, and it tells a cell what it has to do at what time and what place.
So basically the predictability of the pattern and stability of the pattern is the signature of coherence of
exactly.
And this 20 thousand of reaction requires speed of light?
Yes, it is important. For instance, such a reaction happens in the following way. The molecule takes up the photon. This takes a nanosecond. And after this nanosecond, the photon is not thermalized, it doesn't produce heat, it is not transferred into heat, but it is given back to the field and is available for the next reaction. So you don't need 100,000 photons in order to trigger these reactions. With one photon, which is you can trigger 100,000, or it's an autocatalytical messenger for the reactions which happen.